Announcements.
Okay, so first of all, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Eric Iskin, Chair of the Partnership Grants Committee, and we are having a meeting of that committee right now. That's what we're doing. So Dan, why don't you go ahead and give us the introductory comments?
Welcome committee members, liaisons, and members of the public to the Partnership Grants Committee meeting. We are using Zoom with the goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you would like to comment during the meeting, please use the raised hand feature. To use the raised hand feature by phone, dial *9 on your phone's dial pad to raise your hand and do the same to lower your hand. Please utilize this tool to virtually indicate that you would like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate the discussion. Going forward, all LSTFC and committee meetings will be recorded and posted to the State Bar website. A friendly reminder that this is a video conference, and please be aware of your surroundings behind you, or use one of these beautiful State Bar backgrounds like we do. Troubleshooting tips for those using Zoom on a computer: when on mute, hold down the space bar to temporarily unmute. If you use your phone to dial into this meeting, please be sure your computer's microphone is on mute to avoid audio feedback. And while joining, audio via computer is highly recommended. So if an individual loses audio, they can call in separately using the Zoom conference number. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dan. Shall we do roll call?
Sure. Eric Iskin.
Present.
Wilbur Shelley.
Present.
Jason Galkin.
Here.
Nina Cruz.
Here.
Joseph Lee. Christina Vanarelli.
Here.
Judge Jaskol. And then our liaison, Selena Copeland. And then Melanie. Hi, Melanie. State Bar staff, I'll do next. Elizabeth Hom. Danielle McCray.
Here.
Dan Pasmanic.
Here.
Colleen Speedo.
Here.
Great. So we have quorum, Eric.
Okay, so we have what, 1, 2, 3, 4.
We have five voting members.
5 voting members. Let's see, oh, Jason, okay, right. Okay, thanks everybody, good. Is there any member of the public here?
No, there's no members of the public.
So I will then assume that there is no public comment. Hearing none, let's move on to the, the consent items on the agenda. Anybody have any comments on the action summary of our last meeting? Okay, do we have a motion to approve that action summary? I will move.
Okay, and I second that.
Great. I'll take a roll call vote. Eric Iskin.
Yes.
Shelley.
Yes.
Galkin.
Yes.
Cruz.
Yes.
Lee. Vanarelli.
Yes.
All right, motion passes.
Okay, so let's get to the heart of our meeting, which is to discuss the PG2 2023 proposals and develop a tentative recommendation for funding. So I think we've got a PowerPoint.
Yes.
So we want to start maybe rolling through that.
Sure. It looks like my computer screen is stalling slightly. Does everyone see the PowerPoint screen?
Mhm.
We see it.
Okay, great. Just a reminder of the 2023 partnership grants timeline as to where we started, where we're at, and then where we're going. In January 28th, we released the 2023 RFP and the application to potential applicants. From February to March of this year, we did outreach to potential applicants. We held a office hours format to go over the application and RFP requirements. March 18 was the application deadline. And then after that, April 6th, we met to have an initial calibration session during our partnership grant committee meeting, and then sort of moved forward ahead with calibration sessions 1 through 6. Today, we're meeting to discuss tentative funding recommendations. And then June 7th, we'll be finalizing them pending any follow-up to the grantees, as well as getting an update regarding the allocation amount, which is still TBD, still pending. June 17 is a trust fund commission meeting to approve the recommendations, which will be finalized in September through October.
Crystal, you're showing the wrong screen.
Oh. Are we not able to see the timeline? I'm on dual monitors, so.
We see your presenter view.
Oh, okay, let's see. I will do it from this slide, just so it doesn't look strange. How about this view?
Yeah.
That's better.
Okay,
Better.
thank you. Thank you for letting me know. In terms of the overview of the partnership grants received, we received 31 proposals for a total requested amount of 2.899034. As I mentioned, the available funding for 2023 grants is still pending. Just for reference, 2.58 million was distributed for the 2022 partnership grants. We received a second tranche of money and administered that under a separate funding opportunity called Partnership Grants 2.0. That was the amount of 3.88. So collectively in 2022, we distributed 6.46 million for the calendar year. As a reminder, the 2023 partnership grants is our typical grant cycle. It's a 12-month grant period, January 1st through December 31st, 2023. In terms of the rubric scores received, I'll share the master spreadsheet in a little bit, but the scores ranged from 54 to 89 points. Average score across all 31 projects was 77 points. The memo for this agenda item has a couple of infographics and charts just sharing an overview of several data points for consideration by the committee. This first slide here is the years funded. Blue are the 2023 partnership grant proposals received, and yellow is the PG 2.0 new proposals received. Just for contrast, you can see 2023, we received 6 new applications and then various applications and with various prior years funded. And surprisingly, PG 2.0, this is specific to the new proposals received. So all of them were considered new or applying for partnership grant funding for the first time.
If I could just add a little comment there in terms of years funded. There's some projects that have been kind of on the clock for a while and then off the clock. But for purposes of this calibration, if a project was funded, say in the 90s, and then just stopped being funded or in the 2010s or whatever, and then just took a few years off and then started being funded again, we started the clock again. So for example, if a project was on the clock for the second time, was into its second year of funding, we considered it a 2-year project, not like a 7-year project or a 10-year project.
Thank you. The next data point for consideration was the requested funding amounts, again, using blue and yellow as differentiating between 2023 proposals received and PG 2.0, the new proposals. Requested amounts ranged from 25,000. I believe we have a grant that's over 150,000 for 2023. And then for PG 2.0, we actually encouraged grantees to apply for higher amounts because it's a 21-month grant period in contrast to our typical 12-month cycle. Substantive areas, very similar when you look across here. I think notably family domestic violence, housing, and then guardianship, consumer finance were some that had a lot more project proposals in those areas. And then thinking about it holistically and looking at overall impact in the state, there's also another graphic here for the partnership grant proposals were applied for with counties served, and then approved PG 2.0 projects are these yellow, orange little thumb text here, just for referencing and get a sense as to what counties would be impacted. All right. So the next piece I wanted to talk a little bit about was just a reminder of the decision-making process for 2022 partnership grants and PG 2.0, as we're the purpose for today is to come up with some tentative funding recommendation amounts or ranges. So for 2022, 2.58 million was awarded. All 36 projects who applied were awarded funding. They were not all fully funded. Instead, the committee took a tapered approach with sort of tapered cuts based on rubric scores and also looking at funding priority. They also had a top funding range of $120,000, and there was additional considerations for geographic diversity. So some projects serving rural counties got a little bit more once we sort of did a haircut across the board and sort of reallocated them back. The chart here is from when we did that deliberation process, and that's just for reference. Partnership Grant 2.0, which we administered earlier this year. Timing is a little bit mushy because we've distributed a lot of money in a very short amount of time. Was 3.88 million that was awarded. 26 out of 28 projects were awarded funding. 11 of those projects were seeking supplemental funding to a 2022 partnership grant project, and there were 15 new projects. Generally, for this approach, the new project scored pretty high with an average score of 83 points, and that was utilized as a threshold. So projects who scored 83 or higher received full funding, and then those below the 83 had a 15% cut, so to speak, for their requested amounts. 2 projects were not funded for 2 reasons. One, because they received the lowest scores when applying the scoring rubric. There was also a lot more funding than what was, a lot less funding than what was requested. And I think there were other reasons mentioned, project impact, taking a look at some other proposals from like one grantee who had submitted 4 proposals and one of them was not funded. And staff met also to come up with some recommendations or some proposals for the committee's consideration as to some approaches. And because we don't know the amount yet for available for distribution, we landed on a 2 scenario recommendation. Scenario 1, sort of referencing that 6.46 in totality that was distributed in 2022. That would mean that we would have enough money to fund all of the projects. So I think our recommendation would be to fully fund all the projects at the requested amounts, and then to address the 2 lowest scoring projects who were at 54 and 51 points, offer technical assistance. That was our general approach, the best case scenario. Scenario number 2 was referencing the previous award for the 12-month grant period, which was 2.58 million. In this scenario, we would have less available to distribute than what was requested. So we had a sort of a 2-fold approach. One would be to fully fund new projects, as the funding priorities do say that we prioritize seed funding for those projects, and also those projects scored fairly high. We would also, sort of similar to PG 2.0, utilize the average points of 77 as a way to also fully fund projects above that point. As for remaining allocations, we would defer that to the committee, but some considerations would be maybe utilize a similar approach by having gradual decreases by little like score ranges or little buckets. Consider the total project budget in comparison to the amount requested for partnership grant funding. Look at the range. The lowest requested amount grants were 25,000 is at a lower end of the range that the committee would feel comfortable or may want to preserve. Consider rural impact, statewide equity, and then also top of range. Again, for 2022, that was 120,000. And when you factor in PG 2.0, the top of range would be 150,000.
So Crystal, are the do we have any sense from the legislature about where this is going?
I think we're gonna just, you know, anecdotally, I think we're gonna have sufficient fundings, but I think it's important to sort of talk through the 2 potential scenarios and whether or not if in the case that we do have enough money to fund all of the projects, whether it would warrant fully funding the projects or like how to factor in the scoring rubric, because we did have 2 projects that scored much lower than the average score. So whether or not decreases or cuts or not funding them would be something the committee would want to move forward with. So for scenario 2, I mentioned the average score of 77 points. Generally, these were newer projects, and they were generally stronger proposals, clear description of project impact, court involvement. Funding priority was also scored pretty high because they were all fairly new projects. I do have a couple more slides because staff was deferring the remaining allocation to the committee. I had a couple of slides on the 12 remaining proposals that scored below the threshold, and I can just talk through that quickly, and then I'll share the spreadsheet. So 77 points and above, I think we don't have concerns with. It's really the lower scoring proposals that we wanted to talk more in depth, and whether or not like what would be some approaches, should we not have enough funding for 2023. All right, so I have three projects at a time, 4 slides. So I'll run through these quickly. The first 3 projects you see here all scored 75 points. The first one is Bethesda's Decedent's Estate Self-Help Clinic. Prior years funded was 1, and they're requesting 150,000. This is a remote court-based clinic to assist pro per litigants in decedent estate matters with the LA Superior Court. Neighborhood Legal Services as a Stabilizing Families project would be seeking 3rd-year funding, requesting 105,000. This project supports self-represented litigants through the probate guardianship process, through education, doc prep, clearing probate notes, etc. One notable thing is that project staff would rotate between Antelope Valley and the Venice courthouses, offer remote and on-site support to litigants. The third project is Community Legal Aid SoCal's Orange County Consumer Debt Series, seeking 5th-year funding at 69,000. This is a collaborative project with Public Law Center, and they would be offering 4 workshop monthly series in the Orange County Superior Court that walks self-represented litigants through the full litigation cycle for debt collection matters. They also want to have an educational component by developing debt videos for litigant education. The next 3 proposals, 74 points, Legal Aid Society of San Diego, name change and gender change self-help clinic, seeking 5th-year funding at 85,000. This project provides one-on-one assistance, including doc prep and information on court processes, specifically for self-represented litigants who need a name or gender marker change in the San Diego Superior Court. Next, at 74 points, legal assistance for seniors. This is their partnership to assist limited conservatorship litigants project, seeking 3rd-year funding at 50,000. Another collaborative project with Legal Access Alameda, the Alameda Superior Court, to provide assistance to self-represented litigants in limited conservatorship cases. 73 points, Inland County's Legal Services, Consumer Rights Expansion, seeking 3rd-year funding at 151,000. This project provides assistance to unrepresented indigent consumers with debt collection lawsuits. One call out for this project is that it's planning to expand services to Riverside Superior Court, in addition to San Bernardino Court, where it's currently operating. Next 3, 73 points, Neighborhood Legal Services. Just to note, NLS had submitted 4 2023 partnership grant proposals. 2 of them are above the 77 points, and 2 of them are under. So this is why I specifically wanted to mention that. This project is the Pasadena Continuum of Services, seeking 3rd-year funding at 115,000. This assists self-represented litigants with UD answers, and also serves as triage on cases that should be placed on the continuum of care for San Gabriel Valley. 73 points, Legal Access Alameda Family Law Day of Court, seeking 7th-year funding. So one of our older projects, also requesting 25,000. This is an in-court clinic where volunteers take referrals from the bench on the family law pro per request for order calendars. At 65 points, we have Family Violence Law Center, Domestic Violence Pro Per Project. Again, one of our older projects seeking 7th year funding at $25,000. A collaborative project with the Legal Access Alameda and Alameda Superior Court that serves self-represented litigants in Domestic Violence Prevention Act restraining orders. Our last 3 projects, 63, 54, and 51 points respectively, legal assistance for seniors, partnership to assist guardianship litigants seeking 12th year funding at $55,000, collaboration with Legal Access Alameda and Alameda Superior Court provides assistance to self-represented litigants in guardianship cases. Partners assist in all aspects of the cases, including temporary petitions, general petitions, adding, removing co-guardians, etc. Central California Legal Services guardianship project seeking 7th year funding. Apologies, this should be 70,000. At 70,000, it assists self-represented litigants to obtain guardianships for minor children, referred to by CPS, and then also offer twice monthly workshops in partnership with the Fresno Superior Court Probate Division and the Fresno County Law Library. And then finally, Riverside Legal Aid scored 51 points for its small estates and probate 2023 project. It is seeking 8th year funding at 110,000. The project primarily helps indigent clients with obtaining assets to which they are entitled by the small estates limits. Paralegals prepare paperwork and there's consultations with 1 or 2 attorneys. This project also offers probate accounting classes. I have a spreadsheet to share now with the score spread, but I just wanted to pause to see if anyone wanted to look at any of the slides that I ran by earlier, or I can go ahead and share my screen with the spreadsheet. Okay, hearing no questions, I'll go ahead and share the spreadsheet. So for 2022, I think also for PG 2.0, there are multiple data points. So it's a very large spreadsheet. I can hide and collapse any of the columns, but I just wanted to go through staff's recommendations. There are some numbers here that I think Eric had initial thoughts on. We can get the committee's reaction as well. Oops.
We're going through to try and make sure we are ready for scenario 2.
Correct.
Okay, so this is the haircut phase. Okay.
Haircut, or potentially, I don't know the other analogy that would be for not funding a project.
Disappointment, I guess. Okay, got it.
So let's zoom in a little bit. So as I mentioned, total amount requested 2.896, total amount available still pending. The 2022 amount awarded was 2.58574. PG 2.0 amount awarded was 3.880237. And then I combined those totals at the 6.46. I'm not seeing my scroll on my spreadsheet. Hang on 1 second. Oh, that's why. Okay, so rubric scores, I think currently it is sorted by highest to lowest. In orange are the staff recommendations. That approach is also on this column AC. So scenario 1, column U, that's a 6.46 allocation. I think staff recommendation was to, potentially just fund all of the projects. Doing so would leave an excess of about 3.56 million that would be reallocated for future, for future partnership grant funding. Scenario 2 is at 2.58 million. And so we have.
Hang on for a second. Is it reallocated for future PG funding, or is it just put back into the EAF general fund that's just distributed by formula?
So I'm still confirming that. We haven't come across this scenario quite yet. So I'll confirm that with judicial counsel as well. So potentially back in the EAF, but also it's possible it would go back to partnership grants. Bonnie, I believe you're on the call. I'm just wondering if you knew that what the answer, what that would be. That's Bonnie. Let's see.
I don't think she's here today, this Melanie.
Oh, Melanie, sorry about that. I'm like, I knew we did roll call early.
Right. And I don't know the answer to that question, but I could find out and let you know.
Great.
Okay.
So as noted, for scenario 2, staff's recommendation was to fully fund using the 77 points, just because that would mean 694,000 left to distribute for over $1 million requested amounts. We wanted to defer to the committee. Some considerations that we mentioned again was whether to decrease by scores, maybe look at percentage of non-partnership grant funding, consider a top or bottom of range, and then also rural impact in terms of county served or substantive areas. And then Eric, I don't know if you want to just, I can also talk about 2A and B. These are all tentative numbers, so we can definitely update them. But scenario 1, I just wanted to know if the committee was in favor, if there was similar amount as 6.46 million, or there was sufficient funding that would cover the requested amounts, if the committee would be in favor of fully funding the projects, or would still want to implement some cuts or potentially not funding projects, trying to consider the total rubric score into the review process.
I would want to understand why these very low projects scored so low, and have they followed up with answers? I assume that there must have been a lot of questions and deficient answers, and have they provided follow-up?
Yeah, so one element that I can mention for some of these lower projects is the funding priorities. And because we're sort of tied to the prior years funded, and that was something that was sort of reinforced during the root calibration sessions, some scores, they sort of were negatively impacted because of the funding priority score. So while selection criteria was solid and they either met or exceeded those expectations, when you bring in a lower factor or a lower amount for funding priority, it brought their overall score down. That's just how we were implementing it and following policy in terms of priorities. So
it looks like the last two.
Yeah, don't fit that category.
Yeah,
they do not.
scored sort of low in the substantive areas as well.
Mhm.
So Central California Legal Services, Court Involvement and Impact, they were at a meet. Administration was also at a meet. Project budget, continuity planning and evaluation were at below or slightly below meets expectations. I think one of not the issues, but one of the things that CCLS has raised with us before is it's in Central California and Fresno. So continuity planning is difficult. I also wanted to note this is the only project currently funded by partnership grants in Fresno County. So that would be another consideration.
So they were dinged by continuity planning and evaluations.
Based on the responses. Danielle has her hand raised.
Yeah, I just was going to provide a little more detail on actually the Riverside legal aid. If I remember correctly, it was not necessarily that we had a lot of questions about their responses, but I think they were particularly short or vague. And so it wasn't that there was material that we found concerning, like they were proposing to do something wrong, but if I recall correctly, it was kind of a lack of detail in their responses is what drove some of those lower scores. But we have reached out to follow up with them.
That was a project that we kind of called out last year as well, for being deficient in their application, raising questions, I think, about, as I recall, about project impact. And there may have been some other questions as well. So it's a little troubling that they seem to continue to be maybe unable to provide an application that maybe, or that they maybe continue to provide somewhat deficient applications. So, you know, I mean, we could, I mean, my thought, Will, I don't know where you were going with your comment. I think it was a good comment. You know, we might want to just kind of put a possible flag on those last two. I guess staff's recommendation essentially is fund them all, but subject to what? Subject to having a further conversation and getting answers to questions. I mean, Crystal, what is the recommendation there on
I mean,
scenario?
it was just a pretty mild recommendation of fully funding. We didn't feel strongly necessarily about the lower scoring projects, because we were at a pause of like, how should we emphasize the scoring rubric, because this is the sort of the third iteration that we're utilizing it, and how should that be reflected? But also, if we have enough monies, like optics wise. So I think we landed a little bit safer in terms of saying fully fund, but you know, definitely open for the committee to offer additional adjustments.
So yeah, we do have some comments. So Diana's hand is up.
Thanks. I guess my thought, Eric, just to second your concerns is that if a grantee has received feedback in previous years that they need to do more in terms of explaining their impact in all these categories, and having had the opportunity to do so, fails to do so again. Looking at kind of the scores, it appears that especially the Riverside project is scoring well below average in, frankly, almost every category. And they're requesting an immense amount of money at $110,000. And I personally am not a big fan of throwing money after bad myself.
So would your thought be to, in like this scenario A, for example, to fund all except that one?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not sure that it's a good, I don't like giving less money to something that is scoring, I mean, especially in comparison to, you know, our average so low, right? In every category. And, you know, and then you take a struggling program and you give it less money. And that just seems to be not helpful to them, right? Because now they're trying to do even more with less. And I'd rather put that money, frankly, into the projects at the higher end of the scoring and have more of an impact in those areas. But that's just my own thought.
How about Jason?
I don't know that this will change any of what would be allocated, but I do want to make a comment to highlight it. And Will was kind of talking about the program in Fresno and the funding the continuity planning for it. And I'm concerned that in the absence of some other category where there's an offset, underserved communities where there is not a whole lot of available funding mechanism for continuity will be suffered, or will suffer a greater blow, because there's just, you know, there's not an opportunity to serve them. So for example, you have a community in Fresno, or, you know, even more rural areas where you've got a program which on its own merits might be viable for funding, and not whether this program is that or not. But another situation where continuity planning in the absence of other funding prevents them from getting funded or getting the adequate funding to stay up. I mean, it concerns me that they would get no funding where other programs where there's an abundance of competition, right? So say in LA or, you know, San Diego or like Bay Area, where there are other resources already present, we're funding an additional program to those communities that already have programs funded. I think there should be some kind of recognition for that. You know, if you look at the map and you go back to the map, I mean, it's high population density areas, and I realize that's where we can get the most bang for our buck. I just think there's something to be said for those slightly less densely populated areas and their relative need as well.
That's a valid point. I think we were prepared to kind of maybe not look the other way, but maybe give them the benefit on that one. But they had issues on other dimensions as well, besides continuity planning. If that were the only issue, I think we would be inclined to fund. Anyway, Christina, go ahead.
I tend to agree. I remember this Riverside one. I was one of the scorers, and it took me a long time to get through it. And it is just so deficient in so many ways. It's a made up budget. They can't explain who's doing what. They're only doing 8 hours a month, it looks like. And I think it would be a breach of our duties to give a program that's clearly not meeting expectations across the board any money. All of the other ones looks like they're at least, basically meeting expectations, but this one was not. And I don't think we would be complying with our duties if we funded them.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely fair. I was more trying to highlight the scoring structure doesn't seem to give a whole lot of mechanism for, like, outside of building it into some of the other categories to offset.
I just wanted to interject just for funding priority, because we did walk through all, the staff team did look at all of the scores. I will say some projects that were in maybe more densely populated areas like Los Angeles still scored below because they didn't put any specific efforts or like responses were generic. I think we were persuaded to go to a meet if an area was particularly hard for funding, if the organization was able to describe like the difficulties or some attempt. It's not a meet if they're able to get the funding. It's like we want to see some effort put into that specific area. So I think we tried to balance it out a little bit, but I agree there's still room for improvement. But I wouldn't say automatically those in the more populated counties automatically got an exceeds or a meets. We really tried to like be balanced in that specific rubric category.
Yeah, Will.
Thank you. I think a lot of excellent points. Can someone who reviewed these projects talk a little bit about their past year evaluation and whether it looked like they were meeting the goals that they set out last year, and that their evaluations came back positive? I'm not sure. Hopefully I wasn't on this team because I don't remember this at all.
You would have remembered it.
Because I'm curious, past performance is more important to me than how good applications look. So if we can get some feedback, I can go look myself, but I was trying to save a little time.
Do folks have that available?
Danielle's got her hand up.
So we can go and look at their actual submitted evaluation in Smart Simple, which I have not done, but actually I was the one to follow up with Riverside Legal Aid on some of our questions for their application. And one of those questions was asking them to upload that because they actually had not originally added that attachment to their proposal, which doesn't mean we don't have it. It lives elsewhere in Smart Simple, but that they actually didn't attach it to their originally submitted proposal.
And after being given the opportunity to resubmit that, have they done it as of today's date?
I believe so. I can verify, but I believe that they now have, but I just wanted to flag that when we were originally reviewing the proposals, it was not in that PDF that we were able to look at, but we do have that information now.
What I'm thinking is, well, what kind of decision do we want today, Crystal? I guess we want a tentative decision on both of these scenarios. Is that right?
Yes, and then
Okay.
if there's any follow-up or any communications you'd like to communicate with the grantees, Rivers, I'm just trying to think like Riverside, for example, if it's not funded or if the committee's leaning towards not funding it, could Riverside do anything to still be like in the running, or like I just in terms of like the messaging, I understand the points being made and just want to make sure our messaging is also clear if that's sort of the tentative leaning.
Message would be we expect you to be providing a valuable service, I think. And then be able to communicate that you are accomplishing that.
Right.
And after giving you that feedback last year, we expected something better this year and didn't get it.
Well, let's say we were to decide to fund, under scenario A, we were to decide to fund all of them except Riverside. That would be our tentative recommendation today. We have another meeting in June. Crystal, is that right?
June 7th, which is to finalize. So we're going to give ourselves a few weeks to follow up with the grantees, share the tentative funding recommendations if you do want to get additional input. Then June 7th would be the date to finalize it. I can.
So what if we were to decide tentatively to fund under scenario A, all except Riverside between now and June 7th? Maybe somebody talks to them, and if they can provide, you know, convincing, compelling information between now and then, maybe we revisit that, but otherwise we don't fund them under that scenario. I mean, that's one thought. All right, Diana, go ahead.
Just another potential pathway forward, and I hate to sign myself up for more work, but maybe a quick subcommittee to review those two very low ranking ones again, get a list of what we think is missing and needs to be remedied, communicate that to the grantees, and then your plan, see if they fix it by the next meeting.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know that we necessarily need another subcommittee, but definitely the spirit of getting more information on those last two and making sure that we've done our due diligence. I'm really in favor of that, and not just automatically funding them if we have concerns that are still out there.
Well, let me just turn to staff and get your reaction, because that's more homework essentially, and I know you're all very busy. So is that kind of a proposal sort of to do more work feasible between now and the next meeting?
I mean, I think that's fine. I think by the time the June 7 meeting comes, if we do form a working group, I'd hope that the working group would come up with a recommendation to present at the committee meeting for those two projects. Just confirming for Central California Legal Services, similar exercise with them in terms of like addressing concerns about the evaluation and the other categories for which they were like below expectations. Is that what we're looking to get from them?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to raise as well, there were a number of other projects below the 77 points. Are they not as of a large concern to the committee? And not to increase more work, but I just wanted to confirm, because currently Row W has all the projects fully funded up until, you know, either CCLS or Riverside RLA, Riverside Legal Aid. It was a committee comfortable with recommending full funding for those projects that were below 77, but you know, not the lowest scoring projects.
Under scenario A, right?
Yes.
I am.
Yep. If they're fine, they're generally meeting expectations, and we have the money. Yeah.
I certainly am in favor of everything above the 70s. So the vast majorities, the 60s are kind of a yellow flag for me, and the 50s are a red flag to me.
Yeah, so just revisiting the 60s, I think I might have mentioned this earlier. It is really the continuity planning that negatively impact our funding priorities category that negatively impacted their score. You can see a 5 and a 4, which means it was like a 1 or like a 1 point something when we did the averages, because these are older projects. Additional data points that we got was prior years funded or percent of non-PG funding. And I will say one of the projects like is heavily funded by other sources. So $25,000 requested, you know, it's important, but like they're a successful project, I think, evident by being able to be, you know, sustain itself with other sources.
Yeah, I'm less concerned about those. It sounded like the explanation from earlier on funding priorities explained a lot of the point differential, but if we have the last two failing to meet the minimum, meet the standard, then I think more information, whether it's just staff reaching out and then forwarding that along, or a working group or a subcommittee. I'm fine reading some homework if we can get answers about, especially the evaluation. If they can show that they got it done and done well, then I'm inclined to not argue when we have the money.
So if we did a working group, here's a procedural question. Is that a Bagley-Keene issue?
It would just be two committee members, so we don't have to notice the meeting, similar to like how we did some of the calibration sessions. Two, we wouldn't have to notice it, and then if the committee feels comfortable with the deferring to the working group for that recommendation, we can coordinate separately with them.
So do we have 2 volunteers?
Well, since it was my genius idea, I guess I have to raise my hand.
I'll do it because I looked at the Riverside one and I remember.
Yeah.
Wonderful. That'd be great. And then we can kind of put together, I think, quickly for the staff, a list of concerns that we have. And then staff can add to that, communicate it back to them, and let's see what we get back. I guess from a staff side, I'd be curious too, to know kind of the previous history of us asking for this information, because it's that pattern of not providing that gives me a little pause too, especially with the Riverside one.
I will say both of these, I believe both of these projects both requested for Partnership Grant 2.0 funding. We had the supplemental funding option. And then so as part of that process, we provided the scoring rubric breakdown for 2022 and also had some like either conversations or one-on-one calls with the program if they had questions as to why they scored a certain way. We offered suggestions on how to improve the scores. So that's one past interaction. I think specifically for Riverside Legal Aid, because concerns brought it back to the 2022. We did meet with the executive director and also with the court as well. It's unfortunate that I think some of those updates or some of the feedback wasn't translated in the 2023 proposal, and it you know, we can't always rely on our institutional knowledge because the proposals change each year and we have different committee members. So we should have been able to explain the project much clearly and adequately than maybe what was submitted.
Well, should we move to a vote on the idea of funding all of them under scenario A except for those 2, as to which we would form a working group?
Yes, so Eric, we actually don't need to make a vote today. This is like a discussion. It's not a voting item. We just want to get the committee's like tentative amounts, share any feedback with the organizations. So we can share this or we will share this and then do that follow-up plan for the ad hoc working group for CCLS and RLA if that's what the committee is in favor of. I don't think we have to vote on it.
All right, well, but let me just ask, do we have a consensus around that idea? Any opposition to that idea? Okay, well, Crystal, can we leave it to you, or maybe Diana, leave it to you to work with Christina and, you know, and I guess someone from staff?
Yeah, we'll follow up and then also provide if there's been any additional updates. I think as Danielle had mentioned, we'll provide updated applications and any responses we've received from follow-up after the meeting. So that's scenario 1. I think we have enough funding to cover all projects. I think maybe that discussion will lend itself to scenario 2, 2A, 2B, whatever else you want to describe it, which is if we don't have quite enough funding to cover all the projects, what are some approaches that the committee would feel comfortable with? These are all tentative. Things may change once will change when we have a final number.
So Crystal, do you want to just kind of overview the thoughts about the scenarios 2A and B?
Sure. So in scenario 2A, column X here, what the numbers are is that it's full funding for it's This first implements $150,000 top of range, sort of consistent with what we allocated for supplemental projects in PG 2.0. So utilizing that because 159 is a fairly high amount. And then fully funding up to the top of range for projects, new projects scoring above 77. And then once we get to 77, Eric, I was going to mention, unfortunately, my formulas didn't carry over. I think it was a tapered decrease, 15% or so. I'm going to hide staff's recommendation. About a 15% decrease, the lower that we go, and then also considering the 150 cap, I think that was it. So this would be a 15% decrease if my math is.
So the cutoff was at 77. So everybody from 77 and above was fully funded up to $150,000 cap. And then below 77, there was a 15% decrease, with the exception of the $25,000 project where we thought we'd just give them the minimum there. And then more of a decrease for the last two.
Let me see. I'm trying to recall what I think this is a 20% decrease. So. Oops. It was, I don't recall what the number was before, but it was a slightly another decrease just because it was in the 60s. So trying to take into account, it's just a little bit awkward because if we're fully funding this project at 25,000 and then doing a cut for the only other project scoring 60, there were some thoughts about that too. I think the 56,000 was also another decrease.
Okay.
I'm gonna just put that in for now, sorry.
So you've got no money for Riverside Legal Aid in that scenario?
Yeah, there was no money for this scenario.
But we're still overspending by 52,000?
Yes.
Okay, well, obviously this is rough, folks, but that's just an idea. And we're not necessarily selling this idea. It's just sort of a thought that we can play with. And why don't you go with scenario 2B as well, just to give people another concept.
So 2B fully funds all of the projects. So there's no top of range necessarily for projects scoring 77 and above. And then going downward, you'll see a similar taper decrease. I believe it's 15% again. I'm going to just insert the formulas quickly.
Admire your quick Excel skills, by the way.
Oops, I think this one had a slight decrease as well. I can't remember what the number amount was, but it was sort of like a slowly tapering down, again, taking into account the 60s and that range. It's two projects, whether or not we're going to implement a minimum of 25,000, deferring to the committee. With this, we would have remaining about, I think it was 12,000, but $8,000 to $12,000, but it wouldn't necessarily be enough to fund these last two projects.
No, we're overspending there.
Oh, correct.
There's a deficit there.
Yeah, we're overspending by 8.
I'm not understanding that because it looked to me like we were spending more money in that scenario. So we should be overspending by more because we don't have $150,000 cap in that one. In scenario 2B, like we did in 2A.
I'm just trying, let me see. 7. These are fully funded amounts, 5138.
Yes, that's strange, right?
But you are cutting the low dollar amounts that would not otherwise have been cut.
Oh, these ones, Dan?
Yeah. Well, the 25,000s.
Oh,
those are getting
just
cut
a little
now.
bit.
Yeah, but that might make up for the.
Oh, I see it.
Doesn't. Okay.
but I was just sort of playing around with additional taper decreases, similar to what we did for 2022. It's another option. Again, I think there's no strong recommendations. It's just like what we would do in this scenario.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned with the programs that it's a significant, $5,000 or well, $4,000 off of what is that, Family Law Day Court?
Yep. Or
Yeah, that the Family Violence Law Center.
If we didn't give any money to the last two under scenarios 2A and B, where would we be?
we would have 3,000 and
No, but
1,000.
you want to take, oh, okay, yeah, okay. Yeah. So that would work.
Yes, it would.
But we don't know how much money we've got, right? Okay,
Correct.
so
We probably have at least the 2.58 though, don't we? I mean, is that the thought?
Yeah, typically that's what we usually use as a reference point, just with PG 2.0 and general increase in EAF funding. It's a little hard to gauge. So we wanted to provide as both possibilities. So we may land somewhere in the middle in which we get enough funding. We just want the committee to be like mindful of, I think following up with Central California Legal Services and Riverside Legal Aid is still the right path to go, regardless of how much we have available for funding because of those deficiencies mentioned earlier.
I mean, just to maybe push the easy button a little bit, because I think it seems like there's a high likelihood that we'll at least get the 2.58 and maybe even a high likelihood that we'll get significantly more than that. We may not get the 6.4, but we don't need a whole lot more to fund the last two if we decide between now and June 7th that they merit some funding. So I mean, I'm almost inclined to go with scenario 2A. I think the 150,000 cap makes sense to me. Again, subject to the committee's report between now and June 7th. And if they decide that the last two projects merit some funding, we'll probably have enough to give them money, I suspect. At least that's my thought. Do others have any ideas?
So the idea being, we just don't want to labor too much when we really don't know what we're.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's part of it, but also I think even under, if we assume that we're only going to get 2.58, I think even that recommendation makes sense, given the discussion that we've had. I guess part of what is animating me is that fully funding projects that are average or above makes sense, and then maybe giving a little bit of a haircut, 15% haircut to most of the remaining projects seems like it's probably workable.
Mm-hmm. Can we turn on column Y again? The percentage funded.
If scenario 2A, we can follow up with Legal Aid Society of San Bernardino just to see what the impact would be with the $9,000 decrease. But again, 150 is probably the most that we've allocated for projects for 2022, not factoring in PG 2.0 new projects. So I feel like it's a fair sort of top of range to implement, but we can just ask follow up as well. Dan, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just want to mention that percent funded does reflect how much of what they're asking for we're giving them. It doesn't reflect how much of their project we would be funding. So there are projects that, for example, are only asking for a small amount of money, but they have a very large amount of other funding. So it's information that needs to be taken in context.
I think you're pointing to where I might have some concerns, and where Jason kind of alluded to earlier, that those programs that don't have access to outside budget, I don't necessarily want to give them quite the same haircut that I give to a program that has those resources. So I don't know the most efficient way of incorporating that into a formula, but I think it's important to recognize that not all of these organizations are on the same footing, and I don't know how that's reflected in the rubric necessarily, that budget consideration, and if it is, I don't know.
I will say we
Does that make
definitely looked
sense?
up the total project budget during the calibration sessions for all of these projects, and that was a consideration. We didn't want to negatively impact some of the rural projects who don't have like non-partnership grant funding, for example, but it was something that we noted. It doesn't quite fit into one of the rubric categories clearly, but we did discuss it. I had a question for the committee. If we are implementing or potentially going to recommend a $150,000 cap, I'd be following up with Legal Aid San Bernardino to ask about impact on the project. But as well, I believe 2A also has a 15% decrease for some projects scoring slightly below the average. Just confirming that the committee would like us to follow up just to find out what the overall impact would be as some points of consideration at the June meeting.
Well, before we even know how much money we have, isn't that a little premature?
I
mean, you can, but then we're gonna find out how much money we have and then maybe have to do it again.
And so it's unfortunate because of the timing, because when we find out how much money we have, we won't have enough time to follow up with the projects to have it ready for the commission on the 17th. So it's like a 10-day window. Okay, there's Melanie.
So my hesitation to answer the question that is looming is that I'm not really sure how much longer the Judicial Council's internal process is from once we get an official word. But what I can say is that tomorrow is when the governor releases the May revise, and that will probably give us at least a better clue. And I'm not sure whether policy-wise we share what our guess might be until we have a positive answer, which is kind of what I think the process is, and so that's what we're going to wait for. So again, my hesitation in answering the question, I don't want to put words in the council's mouth, or the governor, make promises that the governor doesn't actually fulfill. But I'm thinking that after tomorrow we'll have a much better idea. So
will the May revise indicate at least the governor's proposal for PG funding?
It will.
Okay. Well, can you folks
Or
send that
might,
around to the
should.
committee so we can learn that?
Sure, absolutely. As soon as we hear, we will share.
Yeah, I'll coordinate with Juan as well, Juan and Elizabeth, for once we get official word. I mean, we have reached out to programs, I think in like 2022, utilizing sort of that 2021 previous and then saying what the tentative recommendation was and then following up. We've done that before. So it's not too strange to ask grantees to provide, like, in the scenario, what would the impact be on your project? So we can do that. Like that's fine. And maybe it's just an exercise. If we do have enough money, we can fully fund everyone. We just want to know in that scenario what would happen.
So to answer, just to get back to Will's comment, I'm trying to think about that. So Will, if we look at the projects that we would, under scenario 2A, fund at 85% of their request for PG funding, those that would suffer, I'll put that word in quotes, suffer the most are those that are 100% dependent on PG funding, okay?
That's my understanding, yeah.
So of those projects, of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 projects that we would be proposing to fund at 85%, how many of them are 100% PG funded?
Let me scroll. Community Legal Aid SoCal is 92% funded by partnership grant. And then Legal Assistance for Seniors, 92%. And then the last two, Central California Legal Services and Riverside, are 89 and 100%. I think the remainder of Central California Legal Services budget is IOLTA and EAF funding. So not non-state bar funding, but that's how they're supplementing their project.
It looks like none of them are 100% dependent on PG funding.
This is a new project, Elder Law Advocacy.
Is that one of those that is below 77?
Sorry, what's this like? Oh,
Ooh,
no, that's
right
not
on.
second, but that's at the, wait, yeah, 77. So that's not a, I mean, if we're fully funding above, that's not a concern for that project. Yeah.
But 92% and the Riverside is 100% and 191%. So a significant portion on those last three, I guess. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess I don't know if there needs to be a hard decision, but I would want that taken into account as we review it at our next meeting.
Yeah, I guess if we get, I mean, I'm a little bit of two minds in response to your comment, Will. I hear what you're saying, but on the other hand, shouldn't we, isn't there some credit possibly to be given to projects that are finding other money to support what they're doing and not totally relying on PG funding?
I think under the idea that this should be seed funding, that is absolutely true. But I think the reality is that there are a lot of programs where they don't have access. They don't have the density of people necessary to really get the funding and the people who care. That's the impression. I don't know if that's actual reality, but being out in the sticks of California, man, doesn't look like there's a lot of money to go around. And
Orange County Community Consumer Debt Services, who is, that's Community Legal Aid SoCal. Where are they? Are they in Orange County?
Yes.
Well, that's not the sticks.
that's for sure.
What about legal assistance for seniors? Are they like in Santa Cruz?
They're in legal assistance for
They're in Oakland. They're in Oakland.
Okay.
Alameda County.
And then also depending on how large these organizations are, do they have the resources for really effective grant writing? I don't want to penalize for that. And again, I don't know if that's the case. And I would defer to staff characterizing whether they do or don't. They're talking to them, but I think those are the considerations that come to mind for me.
Would you feel a lot better? Let's say we have enough money to make that second tier 90% instead of 85%, which we might.
I guess I don't know if if it's 85, 90%, if it's not taking into account how much they're not going to be funded, because how that percentage of total funding. So, but we're also going to hear feedback on whether they are going to be significantly harmed by these cuts. That's my understanding. And so maybe it's not an issue if they all come back and say, no, we're still going with this program. This will be enough. We can make little cuts here and there. Then we don't have to solve this. I see you, Dan.
Yeah, Dan, go ahead.
I was going to say what Will just said, actually. In my experience, this often comes down to very situational factors and things like whether the organization is located in a city or a county that we think of as rural doesn't always have the bearing that it might. There are rurally located programs or isolated programs that just do a hell of a job and deserve total credit, and there are urban ones that don't do much. So the proposal of looking at these, these two proposals that have raised more questions individually makes a lot of sense. And as attractive as it is to try to come up with a standardized approach for them, I think in the end, it's going to come down to very circumstantial issues and just knowing what factors you want to be paying attention to.
I did want to mention, so column G here is a 2022 award some of these projects did see decreases to their projects and deliverables for 2022. But I think we should still do the exercise of following up with the scenario of a potential decrease in the impact on the project. But some of these projects did receive decreases because I think we funded all 36 projects in 2022.
So yeah, let's take a look at the projects that we would propose to fund at 85%. Which row do they start with?
I don't see my bottom scroll on my screen, so apologies. Let's see. It starts with Bethzedek's decedent estate self-help clinic.
Can we look at what we gave them last year?
So they received 120,000 initially and then applied for supplemental funding. As a reminder, all of the projects who were given the supplemental option, they can apply up to their original requested amount, and they just had to answer a brief application to hopefully address any application deficiencies or how the money would be used for the project.
So they're requesting 150 this year, and we gave them 150 last year?
Collectively, yes. Yes.
But if we cut them to 85% this year, they would be receiving 85% of 150?
Yes.
Having trouble following all your numbers.
Let me hide some of these columns.
What I'm trying to do is compare what they're requesting this year, what the 85% would be, and then what we gave them last year.
Okay, hang on one second. Let me see if I can do this. Okay, requested amounts on C, column D has their, I don't know if you still need total project budget. I can hide this for now. C was their 2022 award, and if they got any supplemental award, and then scenario 2A is in column X. We'll start from decedent. So 150, they'd get an 85% at 127.
Orange County, that's the one we're just talking about. They would actually, even under our 85%, would be getting more than what they got last year.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
They are talking about expanding the project.
Yeah, so that's another caveat, I think, as well. That's a good point, Dan. Some are seeking to expand, have higher project numbers. So it's like more of a reference point to what they were given previously.
Well, of course, some of them got significant percentages last year because of that additional funding that they got, that the legislature came up with. If we were just working with the initial funding for PG projects, they would have taken a haircut as well, right? Well, I guess, do folks have proposals? I mean, we could have more discussion. First of all, is there any more discussion? And then I guess second, if not, I would just kind of get back to my proposal, which would be to go with scenario 2A, not funding the last two projects, subject to two things. One, the committee's report about the last two projects, about their investigation of those projects. And then second, subject to whatever the legislature decides to allocate, which the expectation is will be somewhere north of 2.580.
And I guess I would add onto that, Eric, what the feedback from the programs based on those funding levels.
Oh, so is there, Crystal, would staff be reaching out to those projects that might, okay, yeah, okay. I think that's right.
And then CCLS and RLA will be a specific follow-up with the ad hoc working group. This scenario 2A also has a $25,000 sort of bottom of range factored in as well. So just wanted to remind the committee of that.
Yeah, I like that because the 15% haircut on that low of a number, it's, undeniably very significant.
I think currently Legal Assistance for Seniors has a 20% haircut because I think it scored 60 points or so. Does the committee want to increase that to a 15 or decrease that to a 15% cut? We have additional monies to allocate, but I just wanted to confirm.
What if we did 15%? All right, we still have $684 left.
Mm-hmm.
This reminds me of our process for awarding bonuses to our attorneys in Southern California, Edison. What do we do with that $684?
Pizza party?
Yeah.
So if we followed up with the folks who had a 15% decrease, it wouldn't be all of the folks under 77 points because these $25,000 requests would be fully funded. It would be a handful program.
Yes, yes.
So I just wanted to call that out.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, is there any, I mean, this is just kind of my proposal. Any thoughts about that?
I second your proposal, Eric. I think it makes sense.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay, we'll follow up with the projects for those decreases and then also coordinate with Christina and Diana for Riverside Legal Aid and Central California Legal Services. We'll provide any updated applications, but if there's specific questions you'd like us to reach out to ask them, well, we can do that too and sort of meet maybe with the staff team or so, just to make sure you feel comfortable in making a recommendation for the June 7 committee meeting.
Great. Thank you, Diana and Christina, for volunteering to do that additional work. And staff, of course, as usual.
I think that was it for today's agenda. It's really like it was a discussion in terms of the exercise and tentative funding recommendations. I think we've contemplated some potential scenarios, whether we do have enough funding or don't, hopefully getting more supplemental information from the lowest scoring projects for a more comfortable decision making on June 7th.
So, and also I want to thank everybody. I know all the commissioners participated in at least one review session and some participated in two. So thank you all for doing that. What are your, by the way, any thoughts that we have? I don't want to, I'm going to let us go early if we can get out early, but just a minute here. Any thoughts about the process? Did it work? Having different commissioners at kind of different meetings and all that. How do people feel about that?
I really liked having all of the diversity of backgrounds in my specific group because my fellow co-commissioners made excellent points that I hadn't considered. We reached, I thought, a very educated consensus through that process. So I thought it was expertly done.
Great.
Yeah, I also was glad to have my fellow commission member there. I think it's nice to bounce those ideas around. So that part of the process, and I don't know if that was intentional, because I think we were just going to do singles, and then some groups ended up.
Yeah, there were a couple. I just jumped in on a couple of them just at random, frankly. But yeah.
Yeah, I like that. That part. Still, I think this is actually on our next meeting's agenda is more discussion on the rubric and revisions. Is that still coming up?
Yeah, well, we're planning a debrief. I didn't want to stray focus from our tentative funding recommendation discussion. So I think we have a planned debrief for June 7th after we finalize the funding recommendations.
How did staff feel about having different commissioners pop in on these different meetings? And, I mean, was that workable? Is that okay?
That's not a loaded question.
They'll tell you offline.
I've talked a lot, so any members of the staff team who wish to input, Danielle, feel free. Dan, I think you're unmuted as well too.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak for myself rather than all staff, but I thought it was great, and it was really nice to get different commissioners' thoughts and feedback and perspective throughout the process, while also being able to make sure we were consistent scoring team to scoring team, because there was kind of that like group of us that were there for all of them, so we could give the perspective of, this is how we've typically thought about funding priority, for example, in our other scoring sessions. And so I thought it was a really nice balance of consistency and also having different perspectives and hearing folks' different thoughts on it, and allowing or having, the opportunity for all committee members to be involved. I thought it worked really well.
Right.
I would exactly echo what Danielle said. We, I think, learned more through the process because we got more insights from more different people. But I also feel like there's overall more buy-in to the outcomes because everybody has eyes on how, the efforts that we took to make them consistent. So, to the extent that there's tweaks that need to be made, we did our best with what we had. And I feel like everybody has a part in that, and it's easy for us to move forward without questioning it.
Oh, thank you. And I appreciated the consistency that the staff brought to this, that Crystal and others saying, well, here's how we evaluated this dimension in the last 3 sessions, so let's not do it differently here, kind of thing. That was helpful, very helpful. Anyway, any other comments on that? So the next meeting is actually in person, right? More or less, at least in a couple locations, sort of.
I mean, that's an option because the Bagley-Keene rules are still in effect. I don't know. I think I saw Elizabeth's head pop in too, but I don't know if I don't think you've confirmed that was in person.
So, hi everyone. Apologies for coming in late, but it sounds like you guys made a lot of progress very quickly. For future meetings, we are hoping to be able to be in person. We're still outfitting our technology to be able to do that, to be able to have in-person meeting with the option for public members to participate remotely. Right now, the plan for June 7th is to have locations in San Francisco and Los Angeles. And I think moving forward, we would aim to have meetings in one location. And if we are to have all in-person meetings, the location would be in Los Angeles. But that probably won't be until July.
So we can plan to show up in either the LA or San Francisco State Bar offices on June 7th if we want to.
If you'd like to, or to notice your location, as you did today.
And what's for lunch?
I believe you'll have sandwiches and cookies.
All right.
That's the goal.
I missed that. All right. Well, I don't have any further business. Do we? Crystal, anybody? Any other thoughts? All right. Well,
I have just one quick. Did everybody else get the evaluations in? Did all the applicants get their evaluations in?
In response to
For
Riverside Legal Aid not attaching theirs.
Yeah.
I checked. I've got Riverside Legal Aid's 2021 evaluation.
But all the other applicants, they did get
Yeah, so we have all the evaluations in. The one piece extra step is that we asked them to upload a copy onto their application. So all of it is on Smart Simple. It's just that one piece of not it being in the application made the application review a little bit trickier, but all of them were submitted on time. So we do have them.
Thank you for the clarification.
okay. Well, I think we can adjourn. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody. And
Have a great day.
we'll be an hour and a half back, right? Great.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Wasn't this scheduled till 4?
Yep.
It was. Enjoy downtown. Well, I don't know if you have time to go walk around, but
a little bit. I'm going to finish my lunch. So.
Hey, all right, take care.
There was once a time that this process